The shot heard. Across the stars, the fortress moon called Aegis 3 was not beautiful, not like the garden worlds or the floating citadels of the old empires, but it was human and proud. It hung over a dim red planet whose soil was dry and cracked like an old wound. Around it, in orbit, drifted the steel bones of a shipyard, 1,000 sparks from welders painting the night. At the heart of that ring stood the Titan Rail, the first planetary defense gun humanity had built with its own hands after 2 centuries of exile and fear. It was longer than most cities, made from scavenged dreadnought hulls and powered by the last fusion core that Earth's refugees had carried with them before their world burned. It was both a promise and a threat. Commander Arya Khan stood at the command platform above the barrel, her gloved hands resting on the control rail. Around her, engineers and technicians whispered final checks. Steam hissed, cables trembled, and in the deep chamber below, the projectile waited, a simple tungsten spear polished until it shone like silver under the floodlights. The weapon had one purpose: to send a slug faster than any ship had ever moved, and to show the universe that humanity was no longer the prey area's voice, cut through the noise, steady and low. Begin sequence. Power to primary coils. Magnetic fields surged alive with a deep hum that grew into a roar that shook the ground. The gun crews flinched, but no one moved from their posts. The readouts flared green one after another until only one red mark remained the trigger. She took a breath and laid her palm on the console. It felt warm, like a living thing. The engineers had warned her the interface was unstable, that it might feed back through the neural link and burn her mind out. Arya did not care. For generations, humans had hidden under rocks while alien fleets divided the stars. If this gun worked, the age of hiding was over fire. The word was soft, but the world exploded. The slug tore through the barrel at near light speed, and for an instant, the magnetic field turned white-hot. Lightning rippled across the gun's frame, and the recoil waves slammed through the moon's crust like thunder. Every window in the base shattered outward. The projectile vanished into space, and a moment later, the monitors showed the asteroid target spinning apart, vaporized into dust. The Titan Rail had not just worked, it had rewritten the rules. Cheers and shouts filled the chamber. Men and women hugged each other and slapped the walls. Some cried. Humanity had built something that mattered. But Arya could not join them. Her hand still rested on the console, and her vision blurred with bright lines like constellations drawn in her mind. She saw paths of light weaving across black space equations that made sense and yet felt alive. Then she heard it, a whisper, not in her ears but inside her head, a voice like wind saying her name, Arya Khan Starborn. She stumbled back, gasping. The power core's readings spiked far beyond predicted limits before settling back to normal. The crew noticed her pale face and rushed to help, but she waved them away. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled. Somewhere deep inside, she knew that was a lie across the border. Thousands of light years away, alien listening posts detected the blast wave. The Seraph Dominion priests froze in their golden halls, whispering that humanity had touched forbidden power. The insectoid Keth swarms hissed in fear, their collective mind sensing danger. The vervain courts of glass and song fell silent, each monarch feeling a chill. A primitive race had just fired a weapon that bent the vacuum itself, and no known empire could explain how. Back on Aegis 3. The engineers danced, but Arya walked alone to the observation deck. Through the cracked glass, she saw the thin smoke rising from the barrel that had almost melted under its own strength. It looked alive, breathing fire into the stars. Her reflection stared back, eyes bright with something new, something ancient. The comms crackled with distant static, and then a faint pulse repeated 3 times. It was not any known signal. It came from deep space, and yet the message carried her name again. She felt the whisper return not in words, but in feeling. "You have begun." Arya stood very still as the stars outside seemed to shift ever so slightly, as if watching her back. The first human railgun had fired, and the universe had heard it. Empires that blinked the day after the firing of the Titan Rail. The sky above Aegis 3 still shimmered faintly with leftover energy waves that refused to fade, as if the stars themselves remembered what had happened. The engineers called it residual magnetoplasma, but to the soldiers who had seen it, it looked more like a scar across heaven, a mark of power no human should hold. Commander Arya Khan had barely slept. Her mind kept replaying the moment the slug left the barrel and the world turned white. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the same whisper, calling her Starborn, and each time it left her heart beating too fast when dawn came, if such a word had meaning on a fortress moon. She walked alone across the rail's length. The metal was warm under her boots and still smelled faintly of ozone. Crews worked below, replacing cracked coils and shattered supports. Every hand moved with quiet pride, but behind their pride there was fear. They all knew what that shot had meant, not just for them, but for the galaxy that had long looked down on humanity. As a broken species scattered and harmless in the far reaches of space, those same empires stirred uneasily. The Seraph Dominion gathered in their crystalline cathedrals and sang to their gods of order for protection. The Keth hive screamed in the dark, their collective mind overwhelmed by the taste of new danger. The Vervain courts, who had once traded Earth's oceans for spice and gold, stopped their songs and turned their eyes toward Aegis III. For the first time in living memory, the great empires hesitated. Their fleets did not move, their ambassadors did not speak, their weapons did not fire. Fear had a shape, and that shape was human. On the base, communication relays exploded with messages. Human colonies from across the outer rim sent congratulations or warnings depending on their politics. Some wanted to celebrate the first great human weapon, others feared retaliation. Arya listened to them all in silence, her thoughts turning inward. The strange vision she had seen, the lines of light and the impossible patterns, haunted her. She found herself sketching them without realizing, lines curving into spirals that made no mathematical sense, yet matched the magnetic harmonics of the gun. She took the sketches to Dr. Matteo, Sol the Titan's chief engineer who had been overseeing the repairs. Matteo looked exhausted, but his eyes still shone with the kind of excitement that only engineers carried when they saw something new that should not exist. He examined her drawings in silence, then pointed at a section where the lines folded back on themselves, forming a loop. He said this shape appeared in the power readouts from the firing sequence. It was impossible, he said, yet it was there. He told her that during the shot, the gun's magnetic field had synchronized with her brainwave pattern through the neural link. He said it as gently as he could, but his meaning was clear. The Titan rail had not only drawn power from its core, it had drawn power from her area. Felt cold. She wanted to believe it was coincidence, but the whisper in her mind said otherwise. She asked Matteo if the weapon could fire without her. He hesitated too long before answering, and that told her enough. She left his lab without another word and returned to the observation deck where the crater from the recoil had split part of the moon's surface. From that wound, the faint glow still rose upward like a quiet flame. As she stared at the horizon, a small transmission came through the secure channel. It was marked Priority Alpha and encoded in a pattern only military intelligence used. The message was simple. A short burst of static followed by coordinates at the edge of human space and one word repeated 3 times: Starborn. Arya frowned and called for a comms officer to trace the origin. The signal had come from deep within neutral space right between Seraph and Keth territory. No human station existed there. Later that night, as Aegis III orbited into the planet's shadow, Arya met with her senior staff. They argued about what the message meant. Some said it was an alien trick meant to bait them into revealing their strength. Others thought it was a call for help from an old human outpost lost during the Exodus Wars. Matteo only listened quietly, and then asked her what she had heard inside her head during the shot. The room went still. Arya did not answer because the truth frightened her more than any enemy fleet could. She could still feel the pulse under her skin, like the hum of the rail waiting to fire again. Outside, beyond their walls, the listening posts of 3 alien empires blinked red warning lights. Intelligence analysts across the galaxy stared at the readings and found no logical explanation. They recorded energy signatures that no known technology could match. The data frightened them so much that some erased it entirely rather than send it upward. For the first time in countless years, the galaxy's rulers saw a species that had once begged for mercy, now standing upright, holding a weapon that could tear the void in her quarters. Arya watched the stars turning slowly outside her window. She thought of Earth, the lost home her people still dreamed about. Humanity had been broken many times, but every time it had risen again. Now the universe had noticed, and for the first time in ages, the mighty empires blinked, unsure, uncertain, and afraid. Arya smiled faintly, though her eyes stayed hard. The Titan rail had fired once, and that was enough. The next time she would not fire to prove a point. She would fire to protect everything that still dared to call itself human. The price of power days passed on Aegis III, but rest never came. The engineers rebuilt the damaged coils, the miners carved deeper trenches for cooling pipes, and the soldiers patrolled the crater rim like shadows waiting for another sunrise that might bring war. Commander Arya Khan stood among them every hour because she could not sleep. Her dreams were full of light and sound equations whispering in her bones and that strange word that followed her even when she was awake. Starborn, the Titan rail, had become more than a weapon. It was a living pulse that beat with her own, and every time she walked past its humming shell, it felt like it was breathing beside her. Dr. Matteo's soul had recovered enough to move between the repair sites. His hands were always stained with copper dust, his hair half burned from arc flashes. He looked both proud and terrified of what he had built. When Arya found him near the cooling tanks, he greeted her with a grim smile. He said the gun was stable again, but it was no longer just a machine. During the first shot, the magnetic field had fused with a biofeedback resonance, a pulse that responded only to a human operator. He told her that when she fired, she had linked to it at the level of nerve and thought her body had survived, but her mind had changed. Arya did not deny it. She could feel the rhythm of the Titan rail deep inside her chest, like a second heartbeat. Before she could answer, the alarm sirens howled. The Seraph Dominion had sent a ship, one of their peace lances gleaming white and gold, sliding into orbit like a blade. The message from its captain was polite and deadly, they claimed, to bring peace, but demanded inspection of the rail and its operators. The crew looked to Arya for orders. She knew refusal might mean war, but she also knew letting them in would expose everything. The Empires were not afraid of weapons, they were afraid of what humanity might become if it learned to shape power with Willaria, agreed to meet them under truce. The Seraph delegation walked through the hangar in silence, tall, pale beings wrapped in silk armor. Their leader spoke with a calm voice, saying that such power belonged only to those chosen by the stars. Arya replied that humans had no gods to ask for permission, only the courage to build with their own hands. The alien smiled thinly, as if speaking to a reckless child. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of unease. He asked who had fired the rail. She said she had. His expression changed slightly, just enough to reveal fear disguised as pity. He said the weapon carried a resonance older than time, and that those who touched it would burn themselves away. He warned her once and then left without another word. That night, a Keth strike group raided a nearby colony moon. Aegis outpost. 9 home to miners and their families. Their distress signal reached Aegis 3, and every heart on the base turned cold. Arya demanded launch clearance for the Titan rail. Matteo tried to stop her, saying the capacitors were not ready. The coils could not handle a second shot so soon. The heat buildup could destroy the moon split. The crust even kill her through the neural link. She heard him and still gave the order. Fire control teams scrambled, engineers screamed, readings flashed red. Arya stepped into the chamber, placed her hand on the console, and closed her eyes. For a moment she felt everything. The stars, the vacuum, the lives below waiting for her to choose. She thought of the miners and children hiding in tunnels, praying to names they barely remembered. She thought of the empires watching, ready to strike when humanity faltered. And then she let go of fear and called the light. The Titan rail roared louder than before, tearing open the night sky. The slugs streaked toward the colony moon and met the Keith ships halfway. The blast erased them utterly, leaving only silence. When the light faded, Arya fell to her knees, blood running from her nose. The gun's coils glowed red like molten metal. Matteo dragged her back from the console, shouting her name. The medical staff rushed in, but she waved them away, asking only one thing: were they safe? The communication officer nodded with tears in her eyes. Outpost 9 had survived. Hours later, when the fires were out, Matteo sat beside her bunk. He told her that the gun had nearly melted. The base had lost half its power grid, and she had been unconscious for minutes. She asked if the rail could be fired again. He said, not for weeks, maybe longer. And even then, it might demand more from her, each time. She looked at her trembling hands and said softly, then it will take what it must. Across the stars, fleets moved quietly toward human space. The empires no longer doubted. They had seen what humanity could do with will and steel and something deeper. They whispered the word Starborn in their own tongues with Fear dripping like poison, Arya lay awake under the hum of the life support systems, listening to the faint echo of that word inside her chest, and knowing that the price of power had only just begun. A knife in the hangar Aegis. 3 hung silent above, the red planet like a wounded beast. The great Titan rail slept for the first time in weeks, its coils dim, its breath quiet. The engineers moved like ghosts through the ruined hangars, repairing power lines and sealing cracks in the dome. Commander, Arya Khan stood on the upper gantry, watching them all, her face hard and calm but her eyes heavy with sleeplessness. Each night she dreamed of fire and light, and each morning she woke to reports of alien fleets moving closer. The Seraph Dominion had declared a holy quarantine around human space. The Keth Hive had begun harvesting asteroids near the border. The Vervain courts had withdrawn their traders, pretending neutrality, while secretly building warships. Humanity had frightened the galaxy, but fear never stayed still for long. Fear always wanted blood. Arya met with her officers in the command hall. They argued about defenses, supplies, morale. Some wanted to evacuate Aegis, 3 while they still could. Others demanded they build more. Guns. Arya listened without speaking until the room fell quiet. She told them that if they ran now, they would run forever. The Titan rail had given humanity a voice, and the whole galaxy had heard it. If they surrendered that voice now, it would never return. Her words silenced them, but silence could not mend their doubt. Outside the window, the stars glimmered faintly red, as if already burning. Dr. Matteo Sol arrived late, his face pale and drawn. He carried new data on the Titan rail systems, and none of it was good. The cooling spine was decaying faster than predicted. The reactor shielding cracked, the energy feedback loop unstable. He warned that another full shot could collapse the entire base. Arya thanked him and dismissed the others. When they were alone, he asked her the question he had been holding for days. "Do you still hear it?" She hesitated, then nodded. She said it whispered only when she was near the gun, like a heartbeat under her own, like the stars were waiting for her. Answer. Matteo did not call her mad. He said softly that maybe this was the cost of creating something greater than themselves. That night the cost came due. The hangar alarm shrieked as explosions tore through the lower decks. Smoke poured up through the vents and the gravity field flickered. The guards found the first body near the coolant pumps. A young technician named Varen shot in the back. The security feeds showed a figure moving through the tunnels carrying demolition charges. Human, not alien. The saboteur moved with purpose, heading straight for the main cooling spine. Arya ran from the command hall without waiting for guards, her boots hammering against steel. She reached the spine chamber just as the figure placed the last charge. The saboteur turned and she froze. It was Captain Ilya Dorn, one of her own officers, the same man who had sworn loyalty to her after the first firing. His face was hollow with guilt and anger. He shouted that the gun was a curse, that it would doom them all. He said the empires would never stop until humanity was ash and dust. He said he was saving them by ending it. Now Arya walked toward him slowly, hands raised. She told him that fear had already taken everything from them once, and that, if he destroyed the Titan rail, he would finish the job the empires had started. He hesitated, tears in his eyes. Then the ceiling groaned as another explosion echoed somewhere above. He flinched and pressed the trigger. Arya leapt forward, tackling him as the first charge detonated. Fire swallowed the chamber. Metal screamed as the support beams gave way. Arya felt the shockwave slam her against the floor, and the world went dark. When she opened her eyes, she was half buried under rubble, the air thick with smoke. Matteo and the rescue teams pulled her free hours later. She was bruised, burned, and coughing, but alive. The cooling spine, however, was shattered. The Titan rail lay crippled, its coils silent. In the infirmary, Matteo told her that Dorn was dead, crushed under the collapse. He said quietly that the sabotage was not random. Dorn had received encrypted messages from off-world sources. Someone had wanted the gun destroyed before it could fire again. Arya listened in silence, her face unreadable but her mind already racing through possibilities. She remembered the Seraph officer's warning, the Keth raids, the whisper in her head. None of this was coincidence. Someone or something wanted to silence humanity before it discovered what Starborn truly meant. That night, she stood again before the damaged Titan rail. Her reflection shone faintly in the broken metal. The hum that had always been there was gone, replaced by a faint echo like a heartbeat far away. She laid her hand on the cold surface and whispered to it, asking if it still remembered her. For a moment she felt warmth under her palm, a flicker of light across her vision, and then the whisper returned, weak but clear. "You are not alone." She looked up at the dark ceiling and felt the weight of that truth. The saboteur had failed, but others would come. The empires would march, and the galaxy would test them again. She squared her shoulders and turned to her crew, waiting in the shadows. She told them they would rebuild because that was what humans did. They broke and then they built again. She told them the Titan rail would rise once more, not as a weapon of fear, but as a promise to the stars that humanity would not bow again. Share the trigger. The aftermath of the sabotage left Aegis 3 quiet but tense. The Titan rail rested in a battered hangar, its once gleaming coils scarred and twisted, and the smell of burnt metal lingered in every corridor. Commander Arya Khan walked through the wreckage, her boots clanging against the steel floor. She passed the shattered supports, the smoking vents, and the fallen scaffolding. Her eyes scanned every detail because she knew the empires would not wait. They had seen humanity reach for the stars with fire, and they would come with more than caution. They would come with fleets and strategies designed to break her people before the gun could ever fire again. The crew gathered in the hangar below the observation deck. They were tired, bruised, and fearful. Some had lost friends in the sabotage, and others questioned if they had the strength to go on. Arya stepped onto the platform and called them to attention. Her voice carried over the hum of the emergency generators. "The Titan rail is more than a weapon," she said. "It is a promise, and promises are not kept by one person alone. We have seen what fear can do. It turns friends into saboteurs and allies into ghosts. But we have also seen what courage can do. It binds. Us together makes the impossible real. And I will not let a weapon forged by human hands and hearts die." In fear, silence fell as the crew absorbed her words. Then slowly hands rose. Voices echoed agreement. They would stand together, share the burden, and trust in one another. Arya felt the pull of the Starborn whisper again deep inside her mind, telling her she was not alone, that the choice she had made was not hers alone either. She moved among the volunteers, showing them how to link to the rail with the neural interface. Each person placed their hand on the copper conduits and felt the magnetic hum pulse under their fingertips. They hesitated at first, but when Arya placed her hand on the console and the hum responded to her focus, they felt it too. The power was not theirs individually, but together. They could guide it, control it, and anchor it without letting it consume any single person. For weeks, the crew trained in shifts, breathing together, moving their thoughts as one. Arya guided them through the sequences, teaching them to visualize the slug traveling through space before it even left the barrel. She reminded them that Starborn was not a birthright, but a choice, a decision to face fear and to bind strength into action. Every day the Titan rail thrummed beneath their hands, the hum growing steadier each time, and each day the empires across the stars felt it, even if they did not yet know how to name the threat. Dr. Matteo Sol oversaw the technical adjustments, in parallel reinforcing the cooling spine and recalibrating the magnetic coils. He watched as farmers, cadets, engineers, and soldiers linked themselves to the rail and marveled at the human capacity to adapt to impossible circumstances. He whispered to Arya one night that he had never seen a species choose courage so deliberately. She smiled faintly and said it was in their blood, the stubborn refusal to bow to what was greater than themselves. Meanwhile, the intelligence reports began to arrive. The Seraph Dominion fleets were massing at the edge of known space. The Keth swarms were mobilizing asteroid ships and boarding craft, and the Vervain courts were sending observation wings and mercenaries. All three empires tested humanity in small raids, probing for weakness. But every attempt met the same result. The human circle held the rail. The slug moved with perfect trajectory, and the targets were neutralized without catastrophic collateral. Each firing built confidence not only in the weapon but in the people operating it. In quiet moments, the crew shared stories of old Earth tales of courage, stubborn hope, and unyielding spirit. They laughed over childhood games and whispered of loved ones long gone. They passed around bread from the communal kitchens and shared quiet encouragements. Every story, every small act of trust became part of the neural resonance strengthening the human link, and the hum of the Titan rail became a chorus of voices and hearts moving as one Arya herself felt the change within her. The Starborn whisper had grown steady now, not fleeting or fragile, but strong, persistent and guiding. It did not command her, nor did it frighten her. It reminded her that she could trust humanity to be what she had always hoped it could be, that power was not in steel alone, but in the shared will of those who refused to yield. She realized that the Titan rail could not have been fired by one person safely because it was never meant to be a weapon of destruction, alone. It was meant to teach humanity to stand together and face the universe without fear. When the next raid came, the crew was ready. The Keth had sent a fleet of converted asteroid miners, their hulls thick and armored. Their intent was clear to destroy the human base before they could rebuild. The circle moved as one. The barrel thrummed with energy pulses, the slug streaked through space faster than any vessel could anticipate, and the asteroid miners were shredded without the loss of a single human life. The crew cheered, but Arya raised her hand, reminding them to focus, to breathe, to remain linked. The hum settled back into a gentle vibration under their hands, and everyone understood they had accomplished more than victory. They had proven the principle Starborn was not about one person. It was about all of them choosing to act together. By the end of the cycle, the Titan rail was fully operational, stronger and safer than before. The sabotage was a lesson learned and not a defeat. The human link had expanded beyond Arya to include every willing hand in the crew and even some volunteers from other colonies. They trained daily, refining the resonance, strengthening the connection, and preparing for the inevitable test that the Empires would bring. When Arya stood once more on the observation deck, she looked at the stars above and felt the pulse of the rail in her chest. She knew the next battle would be greater and the enemies more cunning. But she also knew humanity had found something far stronger than fear. Their courage was not solitary. It was a bond, a shared heartbeat across every hand on the rail, and that bond would face the universe together without faltering, without hesitation, and without regret. The human signal. The warning lights on Aegis 3 blinked red and orange as alien fleets shifted at the edges of human space. Commander Arya Khan stood at the observation deck, watching the stars like a hunter waiting for prey that had not yet noticed her presence. She could feel the Titan rail beneath her feet, the magnetic hum flowing through the reinforced gantries into her hands. It was no longer a machine. It was a living network, a pulse of energy shared by every human who had touched it and trained to link their will to its force. Across the galaxy, the Seraph Dominion fleets paused in orbit of distant systems. Their crystal hulls reflected the faint light of dying suns, and yet they hesitated. For the first time, they sensed that humanity was no longer a species to be measured in fleets alone, but in collective will and determination. Inside the command hall, Arya gathered her officers and volunteers from the training circle. The room was quiet, except for the hum that echoed from the rail below. She spoke to them not as a commander, but as someone who had walked with fear and had seen it transformed into strength. She said that they had survived sabotage raids and alien tests, but the real war was not in the blasts of weapons or the maneuvers of fleets. The real war was in showing the galaxy that humans would not be isolated, that courage could be shared and multiplied. She instructed them to prepare a broadcast not of threats, but of unity, a signal that would reach every human colony and every station in the Outer Rim, and tell them to lend their hearts, their focus, and their voices to a single purpose. Technicians worked around the clock, linking the neural resonance of the Titan rail to a network of transmitters spreading across every available channel. Ships in orbit and on distant stations tapped into the system to amplify the signal, while miners, farmers, and volunteers on outer worlds monitored frequencies to ensure stability. Arya stood among them, guiding them, teaching them to breathe as one, to visualize the pulse flowing outward. The Starborn whisper had grown steady now inside her mind. and it reminded her that this was not just the rail or the network or even her crew. This was humanity claiming itself a species that could stand together against uncertainty and the unknown. As the signal went live across human space, responses came immediately. Miners on rock-bound outposts lifted their transmitters, linking into the neural resonance. Students in floating academies coordinated their pulses. Farmers on desert worlds synchronized the timing of their equipment. Even elders who had not touched machinery in decades felt the hum and added their focus. Together, every willing human contributed to the strength of the rail and the network. The hum grew louder, resonating through the corridors of Aegis. 3 vibrating the walls and floors into a song of shared courage that seemed to travel faster than light. Itself, alien observers could feel the difference too, though they could not understand it fully. The Seraph Dominion fleets sensed the energy wave spreading across human space. The Keth swarms hesitated before engaging. Asteroid convoys. Their insectoid minds flickered with uncertainty at the pattern they did not comprehend. The Vervain courts, who had traded humans for centuries, found messages appearing in their secure channels, urging caution and noting the strange unity radiating from systems that should have been easy prey. Every empire was forced to recognize a new variable, humanity itself, as a coordinated force of will. Back on Aegis 3. Arya watched the screens, showing the network growing each node, linked visually as a line of light stretching across space. It was more than a tactical advantage, it was a declaration of existence. Every human voice added strength, each focus harmonized with the Titan rail. The circle of operators had expanded, beyond the base into orbiting ships and distant colonies, and every link strengthened the next. The machine was no longer a gun, it was a beacon, a signal of survival and choice. As preparations continued, a rival human admiral arrived unexpectedly, bringing ships and a small contingent of elite crews. He had once questioned Arya's leadership and doubted the concept of shared will, but now he admitted that the signal had demonstrated something that could not be ignored. He offered his ships and crews to the network to amplify its reach and defend the corridors through which the alien fleets might advance. Arya accepted without hesitation. She knew that the Starborn principle was not about who fired the gun, but about who stood together and contributed to the signal. The combined human network now formed a living lattice of focus across dozens of systems. Alien fleets entered the outer rim, testing patrols and skirmishes to probe human defenses, but every engagement faltered. The signal directed the rail, and the linked human operators coordinated strikes precisely while preserving lives. The network became a rhythm, a heartbeat that could be felt in the bones of every soldier and volunteer, and the fleets that came to test. Humanity could only watch in frustration as the humans moved with a unity that no empire had anticipated. Arya finally allowed herself to step back from the console for a moment. She closed her eyes and felt the pulse flowing through her chest. It was steady and strong, and it reminded her that the fight was not only against the empires but against fear itself. The human signal was more than a weapon. It was a promise that wherever humanity stood, they would stand together, that courage could be shared and multiplied, and that the galaxy could no longer ignore the power of a species that chose to act as one. The signal continued to spread outward, lighting human hearts like stars, lighting the darkness of space and preparing the stage for the confrontation that would test every human choice and every shred of courage across the star's fire. And do not look away. The cold gate hung at the edge of known space, a narrow corridor between 2 massive asteroid belts where gravity twisted, and ships could vanish in seconds. Commander Arya Khan stood on the observation deck of Aegis 3, looking at the alien armada gathering beyond the belt. Their fleets stretched like living shadows across the void. The Seraph Dominion's crystal vessels glinted in faint starlight. The Keth swarms pulsed like black insects in perfect formation, and the Vervain courts floated with silent menace, every surface reflecting what they believed was inevitable victory. Arya felt the pulse of the Titan rail beneath her feet, and through the linked network of human operators spreading across dozens of colonies and orbital platforms. She breathed in deep, knowing that this was the moment they had trained for. The network had grown beyond expectation. Farmers, miners, cadets, engineers, and soldiers had all joined the circle, each one lending focus and heart to the Titan rail. The Starborn whisper in Arya's mind was steady and commanding, now reminding her that fear had no place here, that courage, multiplied by will, was the truest weapon in the galaxy. She walked among the circle, placing her hand on the copper conduits, moving from operator to operator, reminding them to breathe. Visualize the slug's trajectory and focus not on destruction, but on protection. Every pulse, every thought was linked into one living lattice of determination. The alien fleets advanced cautiously, probing the corridor with scout ships. The human signal flared outward, stronger with each breath, each heartbeat, each shared focus. The Titan rail hummed a low note that resonated through space itself, sending shivers along the hulls of the Empire's vessels. Every alien pilot could feel it, though none could understand its source. The first salvo of the rail fired and a Keth vanguard disintegrated instantly. The crew cheered, but Arya held her hand up, signaling calm. She reminded them to keep their minds steady, not to let triumph become distraction. Hours passed in tense rhythm. The aliens adapted, probing, again sending a mix of boarding craft and heavy cruisers. The human network responded as one. The rail fired in precise arcs, deflecting attacks, while the shared pulse of operators coordinated shield adjustments and evasive maneuvers. Ships that might have been lost were saved as the humans moved in perfect synchrony. Starborn was no longer a whisper inside Arya's mind. It was a song carried in every hand, every heart connected to the rail, every person choosing to face fear and not flee. Then, the saboteur returned, appearing in the command deck wounded but determined. His eyes met Arya's, and she understood that he had come to atone. The last conduit in the cooling spine had failed, and only someone willing to risk themselves could restore it under fire. He worked quickly, guided by her instructions and the focus of the circle. Every second counted. The alien fleets had noticed the effort and began concentrated fire. Arya could feel the network flicker, but she reinforced it, sending waves of calm through the operators. Every human heartbeat added strength. Every shared thought stabilized the rail doctor. Mateo Sol monitored the core systems, giving directions and reminders, but he allowed the operators to guide the energy. The rail became a symphony of human will and machine resonance, firing shot after shot. Through the cold gate, each slug precise, eliminating boarding craft, disabling weapon platforms, and breaking the morale of the alien fleets. The rival human admiral coordinated, the orbital ships supporting the rail network, and even some alien citizens who had defected to humanity's cause lent small but critical aid. The corridor became a stage of unity and courage, and the empires learned that a single human could not be broken, but a united humanity could not be ignored. Finally, the Titan rail fired its last salvo, with every human voice adding strength and every linked mind focused on timing and trajectory. The shot ripped through the combined fleets, striking a decisive blow that shattered their formations and forced the empires to retreat. The corridor lay quiet afterward, the silence filled with the hum of the rail and the collective heartbeat of humanity that had faced the darkness and refused to bow. Arya let herself lean against the console for a moment, knowing that she had led more than a defense. She had led a revelation that courage multiplied by unity could stand against the mightiest powers. When the battle ended, Arya refused titles or accolades. She named the Titan rail a lighthouse, not a weapon, and promised that it would guard the weak, teach humanity to focus, and guide the species across the stars. She looked at the crew and volunteers at the circle and knew that Starborn was not magic or birthright, but the choice to face fear and act together. The rival admiral admitted she had been right and pledged his ships to exploration and protection rather than conquest. The saboteur had given his life, but redeemed his choice, and his sacrifice became part of the shared memory. Across human space, signals lit up as every colony and station responded to the call. Every heartbeat, every hand, joined into a web of courage that no empire could sever. The empires withdrew, shaken and uncertain, knowing that humanity was no longer a species to be measured in fleets alone. They had seen the Starborn principle in action, courage shared and multiplied across light years and hearts. Arya finally stepped outside onto the observation deck, gazing at the stars. She felt the pulse of the Titan rail and the network in her chest, a constant reminder that humanity had not only survived, but had chosen to stand together to protect the weak and face the darkness without fear. She smiled, faintly knowing that other storms, other threats would come, but humanity would meet them not as individuals alone, but as one starborn species ready for whatever waited in the void. The story of the rail, the circle, and the shared courage had reached its end, but the legacy of starborn humanity would continue across the stars. Continued we become starborn. The galaxy was quiet after the battle at the Cold Gate, but the silence was not peace. It was the kind of silence that waits, watches, and measures. Before striking again, Commander Arya Khan stood on the observation deck of Aegis III, looking at the stars, her eyes tracing constellations she had never seen from Earth. She felt the pulse of the Titan rail beneath her feet and through the network of human operators across countless colonies. The Starborn whisper had grown steady now and spoke not in words but in certainty, reminding her that humanity had chosen itself, and that choice was stronger than any fleet or empire. The crew moved around her with a new calm. The volunteers, farmers, miners, cadets, engineers, and soldiers who had once trembled at the thought of touching the rail now moved with confidence. Each hand on the copper conduits became part of the living lattice that connected their thoughts and hearts, and the hum that rose from the rail was no longer just energy. It was a chorus of humanity alive and refusing to bow. Even the rival admiral who had once doubted her stood at attention, his crew linked into the network offering silent support. And Arya felt the depth of unity that no alien force could sever. Signals began arriving from distant colonies and outposts. Humans who had never fired a weapon joined the network. Their pulses added strength, their focus amplified the resonance, and soon the Titan rail was not just a gun, but a beacon of human will. Aegis III had become a hub for this living lattice, and Arya realized that the Starborn principle was not her gift alone. It was a choice. Anyone could make a decision to act in courage together to face what others might call impossible. The empires had not forgotten, but they had paused. They watched from a distance, uncertain how to respond to a species that moved with such coordination and fearlessness. Every attempt at intimidation failed because humanity no longer responded in isolation. Each choice to stand together fed the network and strengthened the rail. Every colony and station became part of the same heartbeat that pulsed. Through Aegis III and beyond, Arya walked among her crew, touching hands, sharing focus, reminding them that this was not a battle of weapons, but of will. They trained in shifts, breathing together, visualizing not destruction, but protection and unity. Mateo Sol oversaw the rail, but he allowed the human network to guide the energy, letting the circle control the pulse. And he marveled at how every person who chose courage became part of something far greater than themselves. Even the memory of the saboteur who had once tried to destroy the rail was honored as part of their shared story, because humanity had forgiven him in choosing to act together. When the next test came, it was not fire from the empires. It was the vast emptiness of space, with its storms of debris, radiation, and darkness. The Titan rail fired again, guided by the circle protecting isolated colonies and trade lanes, and the operators felt not fear, but confidence. Each pulse from their hearts sent the slugs precisely, through obstacles, saving lives and preserving hope. The network expanded as more humans joined across systems, until every colony and station could lend focus, and every action reinforced the principle of Starborn. Arya finally stepped outside on the observation deck, gazing at the endless black. She felt the pulse of the rail in her chest and through the lattice that spanned the stars. She knew humanity had been tested and had chosen courage and unity over fear and division. She smiled faintly, knowing that other storms would come, but humans would meet them together, not as isolated souls, but as one living force bound by choice and will. The Titan rail had fired the first shot, and humanity had answered with a heartbeat across the galaxy. The stars seemed brighter now, and in their light, Arya saw not just points of fire, but possibilities. She knew the human story was far from over, but for the first time she felt the full weight of what had been accomplished. Humanity had risen, not only to survive but to define itself. And the Starborn legacy was now alive in every hand, every heart, and every voice across the void. The end.